Hi all. In this module, we talk about a couple of big ideas to help us understand complex topics in public settings. The first is the idea of wicked problems. This is a term coined by engineers and designers decades ago to describe the kind of complex problems faced by planning social policy. They contrast wicked problems with what we can call tame problems, which are issues that might still be tricky but have clear delineations and can be solved by applying the right kind of expertise, like building a bridge, right? The idea of wicked problems has been taken up in public affairs and kind of public planning, and a good definition or explanation comes from John Kulko, who describes it as this. A wicked problem, he says, is a social or cultural problem that is difficult or impossible to solve for as many as 4 reasons: incomplete or contradictory knowledge, the number of people and opinions involved, the large economic burden, and the interconnected nature of these problems with other problems. Poverty is linked with education, nutrition with poverty, the economy with nutrition, and so on. These problems are typically offloaded to policymakers or written off as being too cumbersome to really handle en masse. Yet, these are the problems, poverty, sustainability, equality, and health and wellness, that plague our cities and our world and touch each and every one of us. So for our course, these are often the issues that we have difficult conversations around. And the idea of wicked problems can help us understand why issues that we might think of as pretty straightforward actually persist over time and are extremely difficult to resolve. So the COVID pandemic and all the stuff related to our lives over the last few years, that's a clear example of the wicked problem. Climate change is another. Also, many of what we might think of as kind of polarized political issues like abortion, guns, and so on are based on deeply held values and can appear in communities as wicked problems. So, for example, if a local community is trying to decide whether to build new school buildings, something that might appear to be a tame problem on the surface, conversations around the planning can involve questions about environmental impact, location of the schools and how that relates to socioeconomic and racial disparities, the construction of new facilities and how that might have implications for kids with different identities, the property values of homes in the areas, busing, walkability, quality of life, etc., etc. So these issues are all interrelated, and addressing the conflicts and conversations that inevitably come up in planning means that ethical management and decision-making processes need to be responsive to a wide range of people's values and concerns. Addressing these problems is really hard because the problem sort of shifts around. It's a moving target. It's hard to have like a definitive description of exactly what is the problem. It's not clear when the problem's solved. Any wicked problem can also be understood as a symptom of some other problem. And any singular solution has the potential to make things worse. So wicked problems, they're as they're called, quite wicked, right? Very difficult to deal with. So we can see from the readings in our module that addressing wicked problems involves a different kind of process, right? One way that we can address these wicked problems is through public deliberation, or sometimes called deliberative discussion or deliberative democracy, right? This has been advocated by community leaders, public officials, academics, but the basic idea is that it's possible for people to come together and have well-informed, reasonable, inclusive conversations about topics that matter to them, even wicked problems. That typically doesn't happen, though, unless the conversations are carefully designed and facilitated. So we're just kind of scratching the surface of the research on deliberation in this module, but from a communication perspective, there's a few important things to understand. First, deliberation is based on a commitment to democracy, so that's why it's relevant for community and political discussions. Deliberative democracy is a theory about how governance ought to work, how democracy should happen. Doesn't mean that it is what always happens, but it's something to aim for. People ought to be able to have control over aspects of their lives. They ought to have influence over things that shape their community. So issues like equality and diversity are important. And of course, this involves divergent perspectives, conflicts over resources, and different interests that all need to be acknowledged and respected. Deliberation is also about the thoughtful weighing of options. So, ideally, deliberation means people aren't just acting on their own self interest, demonizing others, or dismissing opinions that they don't immediately agree with or they think are going to be bad for them personally, right? Instead, in deliberation, people actually work to learn about what's at stake with the issue, weigh pros and cons, get good information, and talk through options in an open minded way. Finally, discussions have to be really inclusive, welcoming, respectful. The people who are impacted need to be part of the conversation. They need to be at the table. So engaging in deliberation means listening well, sharing your perspective, being mindful, making sure everyone has a chance to fully participate, and it means paying attention to who's in the room and making sure that the right folks are there to engage in that conversation. Because even if you have a really great analytic conversation about something and you come to a agreement, you may be missing really important pieces of information and really important perspectives if it's only a handful of people and they're all similar to each other, right? So in short, deliberation tries to help people shift their thinking from wicked people who are taking stands against each other, which is kind of the mindset we often have in these difficult conversations, to wicked problems that need to be addressed through people working together. Our readings give a glimpse into how some of this work happens in communities, and the module also includes a list of organizations who do this kind of deliberative work so you can learn more about what this stuff looks like in practice. I hope these examples spark some interest from you, and I look forward to seeing your reflections.